Hey guys, in this video, I'm gonna be teaching you one more simple practice that you can implement into your daily life to help you become more creative. So last week we were talking about one simple practice that is one of my go-tos, and it's sketching trees, understanding how to view a subject and break it down into its basic shapes is so vital to any type of subject matter, whether you're painting portraits, whether you're painting flowers or still life, whatever it is. So I like to go to trees because there's so many different shapes and styles of trees. So that video from last week is one practice. Now this video, I have 3 different practices in this video that are gonna help you focus on 3 specific techniques that most people usually end up having blocks with or struggling with, and that's going to be water control, or having it be cohesive coverage, water control using too much water or not enough water, and then also color theory and color relationships. And then the third one, which is going to help you with depth and understanding how to create more dark and light and dimension with your paintings. So if you're ready for that, let's dive in. How to become more creative in your daily life. If you are struggling to find the time or thinking that you need to sit down every day and do this hour-long tutorial and follow all these steps, but you're feeling stuck, this is a creative practice that you can do every day when you don't feel like watching tutorials, when you don't feel like coming up with this full painting, but you do feel like injecting some creativity into your day. All you need to do is 3 simple paintings, or you can do one of these 3 or 2 of these 3. You don't have to do all 3. But I'm gonna give you 3 different ideas that you can just always go to whenever you're bored or whenever you're lacking of ideas. And the first one is just a simple gradient wash. It might sound basic, it might sound boring, and maybe it is a little boring, but it is also training so much technique while you're at it. So many people, when they're painting with watercolor and they're doing something as simple as a wash, most people use too much water or not enough water, and they also don't have a cohesive way of bringing that gradient down softly from one color to the next color. So it's actually something that is more technical than it may even seem. So to do this painting, again, it's only going to take me about 5 minutes. So if you just have 5 minutes and you're just wanting something quick that's going to inject some creativity into your day, just grab a wash brush. This is the Aqua Elite Princeton 1.5" Mottler brush. This is my favorite for when I need to cover something, a big space to cover. I'm doing a background, I'm doing water scenes, all that kind of stuff. I love using this brush. And to start, I'm getting my brush really wet. This brush is designed to hold a lot of water and a lot of pigment. But before I go to my paper or my pigment, I'm going to just dab it on my paper towel just a little bit to soak up any of that excess water. I don't want puddles of water on my paper. I can start with a lot more water and then I can spread it down if I do end up starting with too much water. But it's good to just kind of soak some of that excess up so it's just kind of coated in water. And then you're gonna grab your color. It doesn't matter what color you're gonna do. I'm gonna go from a pink to an orange to a yellow gradient. Something simple. This is Primary Red Magenta by Mary Blue. One of my favorite substitutes for like an opera rose color. If you're used to opera rose from like Winsor Newton or other brands, Primary Red Magenta is a good one. So I've got a lot of water on my brush. I'm just gonna do just a hummingbird sip of water, just the tiniest little drink of water, not too much, so I can keep grabbing more color, but not adding too much water to my brush, because I need water to grab more of this dried pigment that's in my palette, but I don't want too much water so that when I go to my paper, it's all puddly. And then I'm just going to do one straight across stroke with my brush. I'm going to go over it again so I can spread that color evenly. This is where a lot of people just kind of skip over. I want an even gradient wash. And before I go down any further, I'm going to grab more water, swiping on the edge of my cup, and go up about halfway up that stroke with my next stroke so that I start to bring that color down and also lifting that hard line, that edge from that previous stroke. And then every couple of strokes as I go down, I'm grabbing just a hummingbird sip of water. It's the tiniest little drink. I'm not dunking my brush in the water cup. I'm just getting a little sip of water, and I'll bring it down about 2 strokes and continue to fade that out and get it lighter and lighter. And then about halfway down my paper, I'll completely clean off my brush so that it's just mostly clean water. But again, making sure I don't have too much, and do one stroke. Oops, we got a little dirt on our paintbrush. And just do one stroke that's mostly just clean water so we can really fade that color out. I'm gonna get rid of some of those marks that came from my cup. And then we'll grab our other color. I wanna keep this edge really, really light and, wet, so that, because we're gonna start from the bottom up with our next color, because we're gonna use pushing technique with wet and wet, pushing into the color we want it to bleed with. And now I'm grabbing yellow. This is primary yellow from My Merry Blue. Obviously I'm super type B, so my palette is not clean. I'm picking up some other fragmented colors that I've used throughout the week. But if you just want pure yellow, you can just have your palette be clean. But I don't mind. Then I'm doing the same thing, but from the bottom up. Grabbing that yellow and spreading it all the way across in the straight motion so that it's in a cohesive streak. And then grabbing a hummingbird sip of water, making sure that if I'm noticing any little puddlings of water, I can just dry my brush off and scoop it up. And then go back to bringing this up, and then cleaning my brush off completely before we get to the pink edge. And making sure to not bring too much water in, and just overlapping that pink a couple of times to really lift that pink so that they blend together. And then I will sometimes go back over some areas to really smooth out all the way to the bottom so you don't see any streaks. And that is how you do a really smooth, cohesive, yes, of course it's hand painted. You're still gonna see some little cauliflowers maybe, or some hard lines, but for the most part, it's smooth, it's got full coverage, it's got a nice gradient blend. I could even go back over some of this pinkiness where it's streaking if I wanted it to be really, really clean. This is just the lightest glaze of water going all the way up my pink now, because I'm re-wetting it, and so I'll have to go all the way up to make sure that it doesn't get any cauliflowers. So I'm just streaking it all the way up to smooth that out, and it will soften as it dries. So that is how you do a short, quick, easy 5-minute painting that you can do to practice getting better at your watercolor practice, at your creativity. And then the next one that you could do, just gonna peel this up. The next painting that you could do to practice your creativity is mostly highlighting color. So if you are wanting to get better at color theory, the previous one, the gradient exercise, is gonna help you get really good at coverage and cohesiveness and blending between two colors, so more technique. This exercise is gonna help you grasp a little bit more and explore a little bit more around the topic of color. So again, if you're wanting to practice brush technique, then I recommend doing the gradient exercise in the previous, what I just showed. This one is for the people who wanna get better at exploring color and color relationships. So I cover color theory quite in depth inside my course, The Art Within, and we're currently rebuilding parts of it, giving it a facelift, and I'm creating this huge creativity database that is basically going to help you implement what you've learned in the courses or on YouTube videos, etc., and how to have a daily practice that helps you actually get better at your creativity and your art practice. And so if you're wanting to get better at color theory and exploring color, give yourself really small constraints around what the actual painting is. Keep the subject matter really simple and just do it repeatedly over and over again with different color combinations. So the subject matter that I like to attack so I can practice color is stripes. So with stripes, you're doing a very simple stroke. Your mind doesn't have to think about anything else except for color and maybe a little bit of technique. So I've got this, can't even see it. It's a wash brush. It's from the Heritage series. It's a 3/4 inch. It's covered in paint. So this is the Heritage 4050 series wash brush. It's 3/4 inch. But any flat square shaped brush will do for your stripes. If you don't have a flat brush or wash brush, you can still use a round brush. You'll just use it on its side and go across, and it won't be as perfectly straight, but that's fine. So let's talk about color. So when you're trying to get better at color, a little creative practice that'll only take 5 to 10 minutes to do. I love gathering inspiration from really cute design books, specifically textile books. I love looking through old vintage magazines and textiles, and some of the colors that you'll see like on silk scarves or ribbons and whatnot from the 1950s, if you're really into more vintage muted tones, or if you want some more pop, colorful color palettes, then go towards the 1970s. So you can explore a lot of different color palettes and ranges within fashion. If you grab yourself some books on textile design and fashion inspiration, you'll get a lot of inspiration around colors. And that's what creativity is all about, is connecting the dots. So grabbing something from over here in this other category and putting it into your art somehow. And so if you're wanting to get better at exploring color palettes, textiles is one of my favorite inspirations. And all you're gonna do is, if you're looking at something for inspiration, I'm currently not, I'm just gonna go to a color palette that's unique that I really just kind of make up on the fly. But I'm gonna start with primary red magenta, and I'll explain what's going through the process or what's going in my mind as I'm choosing my colors. I'm going to start with a really thick, creamy consistency of primary red magenta so that it's a really bright pink. And it can be straight across or it can be, at an angle like this, but I want my stripe to be, cute. And so I'm doing this bright, bold color, maybe a little rough edge on one of the sides. It doesn't need to be perfect. And I want to do all of my stripes where there's one little touch kissing the previous stripe so that there's a little wet and wet bloom action happening. Pink or red, very similar colors. Contrasting color is green. Green gold is this brownish green gold. It's literally how it sounds. Kind of bright, neon-y brownish green. And so it's bringing in that element of contrast, and I'm going to have them kiss right here on this corner. It's bringing in that element of contrast without being too Christmas or too overpoweringly green, like a sap green or something like that, or even Kubrick green. And so I've got this kind of greenish brown color blending just right here in this pink. And I really don't spend too much time thinking about each color. I'm obviously thinking about it out loud because I'm teaching the method, but when I'm painting this, I'm going very quickly throughout the painting. So my next, with every stripe, this thought that happens mostly subconsciously, but because I'm slowing down my process, it's happening out loud and much slower. The next thought is, this is feeling very bright. There's a lot of contrast happening because there's a slight green in this yellowy green, contrasting with the reddish pink color. And so how can I tone this down? How can I make this feel a little bit softer, a little bit more anchored? You could also just go the loud direction and do only bright colors, only vibrant colors. But because I want to just soften it a little bit, make it a little bit more not so loud, to create a little bit more movement between the color and not so much competition, I'm going to do a neutral with a warm undertone to bring in more of the warmth that's coming through both of these colors. So I have carbon black with a touch of dragon's blood and a lot of water for this like warm brownish gray color. You can also use white acrylic paint or white gouache if you want to soften your colors and go the more pastel direction. But I'm just going to use a T consistency value of this gray color, and I'm going to go right up against that green gold stripe for this warm gray, very soft, warm gray. And that bleed is going to be the loud moment for these two stripes. That unique thing that's happening right here is the loud moment. And then I'm gonna start shifting it into cool colors because I want to. But again, if you're like, no, I want to stay with warms, you could go orange, you could go red, you could even do black, which actually I'm starting to become interested in doing. Or you could do a deep brick cherry red color with a little hint of purple in it to bring in more of an earth tone. Keep filling up your stripes with surprises just to see what happens. So I've got this pretty thick dragon's blood, carbon black, and some ultramarine violet for this mauve-y brick, maybe some permanent red light too. Don't worry, I cleaned this up. For this mauve-y earthy tone purple, a little bit more water or even brown, because again, we're just exploring color and practicing our creativity. If we want to get better at color theory, at color relationships, simplify your subject matter and only focus on color. And you could do this 5 times in a row and probably be done in less than an hour. So you're really able to do a lot of experimentation a lot quicker in the color department when you simplify your subject matter. So I'm already loving this direction. I love that we added this earth tone in. I love that we added in a neutral. This is our loud, really poppy, more contemporary moment, and I'm gonna tie that theme back in because I do want it to feel really contemporary, really bright. And so like a cobalt blue, like a turquoise or cobalt. So for this one, I added white acrylic paint to this blue that I'm not really sure what it is anymore. I think it's fancy blue. I always call it fancy blue because I wanted to bring in some cool colors, and we're just exploring what it would look like with a pastel. I'm not loving it as much as if I had a brighter blue, but that's exactly what this experiment is for. It's called an experiment for a reason. It's still a color palette I'm like happy about. It makes me happy, but it's just a different direction than what I would normally do. And that's exactly the goal. So to brighten this up now more, I'm not gonna jump so far across the color wheel like I did for these two. So I love Cupric Green for an injection of happiness next to my cool colors. If something's feeling more muted or more soft with my cool, then I'll go in with the brightest cool color I have in my palette, which is Cupric Green, and slap it on there. And so now I'm back to really loving this color palette because it's feeling more like me, really bright, really cheerful and happy. And I love this bleed that's happening with the soft blue. Again, this was just fancy blue and white paint, white acrylic paint. So now let's tie this all in. So green's contrasting color is red. I don't want to do that again. So let's maybe try an orange. And instead of doing a bright orange, I'm going to do a soft peachy orange. So let's just explore what permanent orange, a little bit of pink, so primary red, magenta, even some white paint to make it a soft peach to see that pastel moment happen again, but down here. I like it, it's nice. And it's got pink in it, so the green is really gonna complement well with that creamy pinky, and we'll tie that pink with that. But again, we did this in less than 10 minutes. We can explore a new color palette on the next page with other stripes and literally just simplify your subject matter. And this is so cute. I would hang this up in my house. I would give this to a friend. We weren't trying that hard. It's just stripes. All we're doing is focusing on color. And if you're super unfamiliar, like I said, with color theory, and you want more of that in-depth technical stuff, go check out my course, The Art Within. That's where most of it lives. But again, just practicing it and exploring it on your own, just looking at inspiration online, textile design, like I said, is going to help open and broaden your sphere of influence in color. And then the next simple practice you can do to help implement more creativity into your daily life in 5 to 15 minutes or less, if I can open this frickin' next page of papers. I love these 3 colors together. I love these 4 colors together. I love this, and I love that, and I also love that, and I love this all together. So that's cool. So like you could just explore this color palette next and maybe add in black or other colors. Or you could explore this one next. So what could I do here to make it different? Or this, or this. That's how it works. That's how you start broadening your eye for color. Experimentation over and over, because it's fun too. Look at that, love it. Okay, The next simple painting exercise that you can do to help boost your creativity on a daily basis in 15 minutes or less is going to be understanding depth with a simple tree exercise. So I have a video that we posted earlier that is all about sketching trees from basic shapes. So if you don't understand how to shade a circle, I highly recommend going back to that video and watching it before you move on to this particular creative daily exercise. But all you're gonna need for this one is a size 6 round brush, some green paint and some brown paint, and maybe some black and maybe some yellow, and that's it. So what you're gonna do is we're gonna practice that video that I had earlier, posted earlier last week, that practices the circular motion, but we're now doing it with our paintbrush. And this is going to teach you, if you're wanting to get better at understanding how to create more depth or more organic brush strokes in your paintings, or just creating more light and shadow, more interesting detail without having to go hard in the realism department of painting, then this is all you need to do is practice the scrubbing technique. So scrubbing is literally exactly what it sounds like. But what you need to know before you start scrubbing is that you need a really dry brush. In order for scrubbing to really work and to give you all those fun breaks and details in the shape that you're creating, you need thick consistency of paint on your paintbrush. If it's too watery, it's not gonna have that fun texture. So I'm just gonna start with a mid green, and then I'm gonna add darks, and I'm gonna add lights and yellows and blues and all that stuff to it. So I'm just gonna start with sap green. And you wanna make sure that you've got a really thick amount of it on your paintbrush, and you might even wanna dab any excess water off of your paintbrush onto your paper towel before you go to your paper. Because the goal here is a lot of paint and not a lot of water. And then you're going to take your brush as flat to the paper as you possibly can without literally being broken-handed, and using the side of the brush, so the belly of the brush, not the tip of the brush, not the point, and just taking that brush and moving it in these circular motions. So if you watched that video from the last week's video, we talked about spheres inside of trees and how to create those sphere shapes with sketching, and then also our shading techniques to make it more dimensional and feel like a bigger, fluffier tree. So if we have an aspen tree, or we have, I don't know the names of trees right now for some reason, something that's really fluffy and kind of round shape but has broken segments of trees, I'm just taking the flat part of this brush, wiggling it around, and because it's so dry, it's giving me that fluffy texture. And I'm painting these circle shapes. Circle, circle. But they're not perfect circles because it's a tree. Sometimes your circle will come in and go up a little bit. But the overall essence of this shape is a circle. And I'm just getting that fluffy, leafy texture out of the dryness of using this scrubbing technique. So maybe I'll put in a smaller circle up here. I want it to be even drier because this is going to be smaller. So I want to make sure I get that dry texture. Smaller, fluffy circle. But the overall shape that I'm trying to create with these is that circular shape. If I want a lighter green, I can still wash off that pigment like I normally would do, but I want to make sure to dab that excess water before going to my paper if I still want to use that scrubbing technique. So let's say I want to put in a lighter little circle over here. Just grab a hummingbird, tiniest sip of water if you need more water, if it's not spreading. Don't dunk your brush, just grab a tiny little bit. So you can still do lighter colors and use the scrubbing technique, but you're just grabbing the water or a watery mixture, making sure to dab excess water, and then going for your lighter color. So now I'm creating a tree that's more blended and fluffier together now that I'm adding this lighter value. But this is a great way to show that dark versus light. So our light source would obviously be over on this right side. So I'm just gonna add more of those lighter values on this side of this sphere as well. Again, if you want to see how I break down trees into the basic shapes, that's in the previous week's video. This is just a simple technique called scrubbing that's gonna help you inject creativity into your daily life without having to try too hard. And we can leave our tree just like this, one darker tone, one lighter tone, or we can keep amplifying it and making it even more. I'm gonna merge this a little bit better with just a slightly damp brush, blend this in a little bit more, really accentuate the fluffies of, you know, some of these bottom shadowy parts on these oval or circular shapes. So this is one way where you can make it feel a little bit more in depth or more realistic. I'm just grabbing some water and lifting some of this dark color a little bit and helping blend. So once you have it just like this, you can literally just leave it just like this, or you can add in one more dark color. Maybe add blue to sap green, maybe a touch of black to just darken it, keep it the same undertone, but just darken it a touch. And you can just chunk it in on, let's go a little darker. Chunk it in, or you can use the point of your brush for those more organic leaf shapes. And just find the side of the circle where it's furthest away from the light source. And just gently scribble that in. Keep it mostly just on the left side because if our light source is over here. But creeping over into the middle and even onto the right side is fine too. Just make it more dominant on the left side. We're simplifying shading. We're not doing anything complicated. We're not, really studying and making sure that it's perfectly grasping light and shadow and core shadow and all of those, more technical steps. This is just a 5 to 15 minute practice that you can implement to help you understand light and shadow a little bit better. Start exploring it, starting to simplify it so it doesn't feel so intimidating. And then you can leave it just like that, or you can take a somewhat clean, slightly wet brush and you can soften some of these, blend them in more. For another value, for the midtones, up to you though, you can leave it just as it was. I'm just finding the circles and accentuating their shape of how the shadow would be if it were literally a ball. And we'll leave it like that. And then we can just paint in a simple trunk. Most people, when they're painting in their trunks for trees, go really like a lot longer than they really need to. Sometimes all you need is just this simple Y shape. So I'm using a 35-degree angle on my size 6 round brush. I'm just gonna go a little bit further down than the leafy part for a simple 1/2 inch or whatever that is long trunk. And then we'll create a Y with the tip of the brush. And then I like to go in with the base of the brush while this is still wet and pull out these really thin branches. You can also use a fine liner brush or a size 2 brush. You can try the point of your size 6 brush with the least amount of pressure you possibly can. You can also add in little branches up in here. And that is all she wrote. A simple tree, a really fun, easy practice that you could do anytime you're feeling like you just need to get out of your head or you don't want to follow a tutorial and you just need more, you need to practice more depth and understanding light and shadow. Scrubbing technique for a simple tree. Again, go back to last week's video if you want to understand the inner workings of the tree and how to show up and break it apart into its basic shapes. But those are very simple, easy, creative ways to practice something that's going to help you get better in your watercolor practice or in any medium really, without you even knowing it. You're getting better at color, you're getting better at light and shadow, you're getting better at technique like water control and blending, wet and wet technique with the gradient. So have fun. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that was helpful for you. Again, make sure you check out my online course, The Art Within. These videos are just a very short, simple glimpse into the world of art that I cover inside that course, where we have art school, all the technical, foundational aspects of art, principles of composition, color theory, all that kind of stuff, but then also style school, which is gonna help you to not have to rely on tutorials anymore and create your own unique style with your work. I also have a free 40-page ebook called The Complete Beginner's Guide to Watercolor. So if you're brand new to watercolor, make sure you check that out. And also check out my online course, Everyday Watercolor Companion Course. It's under $100 and it's gonna be basically all of these videos on my YouTube channel, but distilled into a shorter amount of time and much more in depth so that you can really get good at the basics of watercolor and techniques and all of that. So with all of that said, thank you for watching this video and I will see you in the next one.